Hello everybody, and welcome back to class, such as it is. Going to pick up kind of right where we left off, so we're at lecture 8. I don't know how you want to do this. You've got the PowerPoints available to you, at least the short version, and then I'll be posting the link to this video. This video and all the videos will likely be posted on YouTube. That seems to be about the most efficient way to do this. So let us begin then. I hope you're all safe, I hope you're all well, and I hope you're all negotiating this very different semester effectively. And let me know if there's any issues that we need to address to make things better for you. So let's talk emotion talk, theories and analyses, and in the beginning this might sound a little different because we're going to take kind of a clinical approach at the beginning of the lecture, and then we'll go into a more social approach. We'll also have a home activity that's tied to this as well. So let us begin then. I want to, the emotion and psychological well-being, obviously this is a pretty straight up or important point. Consider the forces that instruct us on how to live. Psychological well-being, all important, right? Happiness, paramount. Strive for happiness. Repression and suppression are enemies of authenticity and self-actualization if we want to take the humanist perspective. We got to be able to express how we feel, or there's potential disaster. True or not? Well, okay. Let's let you be the judge. I want to just move through and give you some ideas to consider. All of this is very difficult to operationalize, measure, and provide empirical support. So many of the things that I just suggested here are not necessarily the easiest things to empirically validate. So let's talk. Let's visit with James Pennebaker here for a minute, and his premise here with the emotional disclosure paradigm, or EDP, demonstrates that an inhibition or lack of expression associated with ill health and psychopathology. This is a repeated measures paradigm, which makes it interesting. Clients are asked to disclose through conversation and written media. What do we find? Well, those whose disclosures are negative affect laden more often demonstrate fewer visits to general practitioners over time. Take that as evidence increasing their health and well-being. That is, if people then disclose the negativity that they're feeling, rather than suppress or repress it, right, that it should have beneficial outcomes. Explanation then, emotional inhibition leads to immune system suppression. Remember stress? If I'm inhibiting, then I'm causing myself additional stress, raises my cortisol levels, and results in more visits to the doctor because of the immunosuppression. At least that's one way that we could kind of explain how this works. It's probably more complex than that simple explanation. So the assumption that emotional inhibition is psychologically effortful, and there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate that, an active process that instigates short-term arousal, so that's the stress creation, and it operates then as a chronic stressor with all the negative outcomes of increasing that stress. Using the EDP or some other method then has the potential to reduce the arousal and eventually counter the immunosuppressive consequences of that arousal. That is, getting it out then allows us to relax for the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of take over and reduce our stress response. Now, I'm going to step aside, kind of play devil's advocate here for a minute, but under what conditions, right? And I'll offer, is it possible that simply rehashing the experience may just cause one to continue to relive the traumatic event, right? And notice that one of the factors of post-traumatic stress disorder is the constant reliving of the event, the undesirable reliving of the event. Notice people who have anger management problems often go through anger rumination. That is, they can't get over the offense. They keep thinking about it. They ruminate, they chew and chew on it, and make themselves angry over and over again and kind of build up the level of the anger. So I think this is really kind of a contextual situation where the emotional disclosure might be beneficial, or has the potential in a smaller number of circumstances to be detrimental rather than useful. Now, suppression versus repression. Let's get the terminology straight here. Suppression is thought to be a conscious process. That is, I suppress. I choose to not talk about this, right? or I choose to kind of distract myself or put myself in a different emotional state to suppress the competing emotional state. Repression is thought to be an unconscious process, and this comes back to us all the way from Freud, right? Repression can further be divided in inhibitory or subtractive. That is, I'm somehow going to degrade the signal so the signal loses its potency. I ignore, I deny, and these mechanisms, or elaborative or additive, then repression, is I add components to change the nature of the repressed information. And further divided, active, controlled, deliberate, and at least somewhat conscious to restrain thoughts and feelings, whereas the passive automatic is wholly unconscious inhibition of affect. And we know that just about anything that we can do from an active or controlled point, if we do it habitually, then can become passive and or automatic. That is, it becomes habitual. Right? But regardless, the big picture is that it represents some level of avoidance, either conscious or unconscious, and either through suppression or repression, be it active or passive. What, Proton? All right. So anger, well, what can we do? Let's look at a real life example here, although these are pretty strange cartoon characters, so I wouldn't go too far with real life. Suppression, I consciously suppress impulses. Repression, I unconsciously deny those impulses. So you can see how moving through a psychotherapeutic, we might at first be in kind of the repression, and through therapy bring it to the surface and maybe then begin to engage in suppression. This is Proton, by the way. Poor Proton. Her brother Proton's brother Electron is at the vet right now getting neutered, so we're all looking forward to Electron coming back home this afternoon. So, and so far, not much about social forces and cultures. Notice that Pennebaker's really kind of taken a clinical perspective. What we need to talk about here is then how do social forces interact with that? And we're going to talk to Jacques Derrida. Okay, and this is, as I warned you at the beginning of the course, especially with lectures 9 and 10, we're going to get into kind of undoing a lot of what we talked about. And these are the first elements of that kind of happening. So, the emotional disclosure and inhibition confrontation are relatively non-nuanced constructs. If the expression, the inhibition of emotion is important to creation of meaning in life, and a broader cultural approach might be desirable. So we move away from just our individual experience to how our individual experience interacts with the culture in which we're embedded. Derrida suggested that everything is text, and the primacy of emotion in text that allows us to understand our place in culture and subjective nature of emotion, and thus we create meaning. This gets to a lot of big kind of philosophical points, and I know you guys are down with a certain level of philosophy because we've been there before. What we're talking about here, though, is philosophically is A, how do we create meaning? And I want to ask you a more difficult question. Is it possible to not think in words? And we had looked at that project last time before we split up. The idea was if I can name it, I can feel it. Is that true? What do you think? Can we live a life that's devoid of text, devoid of language? And the big question then is, if not, right, then can we feel something for which there isn't a word? And that becomes kind of problematic when you think about it, this issue. So Derrida is coming from the point of view that everything is text, and primacy of emotion in text allows us to understand our place. So it's being able to describe the emotions, to discuss them, that adds meaning to our life. And for those of you who like word clouds, we see the big word here is Derrida, but the second largest word is deconstruction, and this process of deconstruction is deconstructing philosophy, our lives, our thinking, and really looking in terms of text. So we always work backwards from experience to language. Since we're linguistic animals, it becomes difficult to separate those. Now, this says in-class activity, but guess what? It ain't an in-class activity anymore. This is an at-home activity. So we're going to try it this way, and then I will also load this video. I will put a link in the same section where you find this video, an original link to this video. So in case it doesn't work out too well here, fear not, you will have it available as a second source. So what we're going to do now is, what I want you to do is get yourself ready, get a pencil, paper, whatever you need, or electronic device so you can jot down your notes. We're going to jot down those notes, and anything that's presented in this video, be it visual or be it auditory, take your pick. How does it generate emotion in the audience? And this is huge for advertising, is how do people feel, because people largely make decisions based on their feelings rather than based on their intellect or reason. So as an advertiser, what I want to be able to do then is manipulate people's feelings. I love this advertisement. Now, you might find it boring, I understand, that's fine, but it is amazingly well crafted. And I don't think there is like a tenth of a second in this advertising that has been left to chance. It's all engineered and designed to evoke certain feelings. Now, granted, it's about reverse mortgages, but regardless, I'm just so impressed with this advertisement as being a well-crafted advertisement. So let's go with it, and like I said, an alternative source will be available too.
I know what you're thinking. I thought what you thought. Some things are just too good to be true. Just like you, I thought that reverse mortgages had to have some kind of catch, just a way for the banks to get your house right. Well, then I did some homework. And I found out it's not any of that. It's not another way for the bank to get your house. And it's also not too good to be true. A reverse mortgage loan is a simple idea, really. You turn your home's equity into cash, and you pay it back when you leave the house. Most people use the money to pay off their existing mortgage or pay some bills, cover medical costs, even update their home. And, just as importantly, you still own your home. And you make no monthly mortgage payments. It's a loan designed just for older Americans, and it's helped hundreds of thousands to live a more stable, secure retirement and stay in the home they love.
AAG is the leader in reverse mortgages. Call us today for your free information kit. It will answer all your questions and help you decide if a reverse mortgage is right for you and how to qualify.
I know what you're thinking. I did too. I felt the same way. But I checked it out, and I found out a lot more. It's pretty simple. A reverse mortgage from AAG can give you the retirement stability you're looking for. Maybe you want to check it out.
If you're 62 or older and own your own home, give AAG a call to receive your free information kit. You'll receive the information you're looking for, as well as tell you how much cash you may qualify for. Call 1-800-816-7908 today.
AAG, bringing stability to your retirement.
Okay, so what we're looking for then in this activity, and I'll write this up and I'll put it on Carmen in the appropriate assignment section, is what's going on here. What are the emotions that are generated? What are the emotions that someone who is attracted to this commercial and will watch this commercial, what emotions are they likely experiencing? And then how does this commercial shift that emotional experience from what they enter into the commercial with to what they may exit the commercial with? Because it's designed to create an impact, it's designed to cause behavior. What can you attend to? Well, everything. The language that's used, the props, lighting, music, any aspect of this advertisement is likely tied to the ultimate purpose of that advertisement, to shift people's emotional state, right, to reinforce the desired behavior on the case of the advertiser. So that's what I want you to look at, and check on Carmen to take a look at that assignment. Obviously, we would necessarily do this in teams of 3 or 4 in class. We can't do that now. So it's a solo project. That's the way the rest of our little things are going to go down. And we'll do our best in that regard. Right? Value, I suppose, is around 3 points or so. Okay? And we're going to have a video later, also a different video that you're allowed to, in fact, incorporate with this as well. You can discuss this one primarily, and if you want to discuss the second video a little bit, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. All right? And what do you think? Tom Selleck doesn't look bad for a guy his age. Right? I mean, that's kind of it. And why did they, one of the points, why did they use Tom Selleck? Why wasn't it another actor? Why is Tom Selleck the representative for AIG reverse mortgages? And he's done other commercials, but this is by far and away the best. Okay? Alright. So, let's move on a little bit then. Okay? So, I want to talk cognitive reappraisal. Given that memory is a constructive or revisionist process, and what we're saying there is memories are not pulled up intact, memories are recreated on the fly, right? Part of the process then of this recreation of memory is to create a coherent narrative may increase one's belief that they better understand their experience, and hence the understanding leads to a greater sense of controllability of life's outcomes. So we often morph memories, that is, subtly shape memories over time to support our pre-existing ideas about the way the world works. It increases our certainty, diminishes our anxiety, and as a result, it's a process that we do over and over again. Reappraisal allows us to alter the meaning of the event and thus potentially diminishing the negative affect of the event. And we find that negative memories lose their emotional flavor typically over time through this process, right? And so you can see where it's a psychologically self-protective process. Creating a new narrative may create new insights to the event and thus diminishing its potential impact. That is, that it's not important. Oh, I messed up, but all in all, it's not that big a deal. In all these cases, there may be a shift from the emotional to the rational understanding of the event, which helps facilitate or liberate us from the negative emotions that occurred as a result of the event. To the extent that we're able to do this, right, then we should experience a greater sense of controllability over our lives. Now, referential activity. This is a process, organizes nonverbal experiences and expresses it in language and words. It's the process of conversion. So we have experience, feelings that well up, but again, we seek to name them or to cause them to be something else. So first then, let's say a significant emotional experience is recalled at the visceral level, right, the gut level, right, and via the autonomic nervous system activity or change in vocal tone. So as we talk about an experience, we might notice a change in our voice that more parallels what it was we experienced. Or we might actually feel ourselves becoming aroused as a result of reliving the event, right? So then a symbolic image is constructed that can be pictorially or linguistically, so we can see it in our mind's eye, if you will, or we find language to describe it. And then the image is expressed concretely in this final step. The affective experience is fully integrated into the narrative, right? And the narrative is the sense-making device of what occurred. Notice that we might have to take a couple passes at this to make sense out of it. Penelope, what are you doing? Come here. Let's look at Penelope. There's Penelope. She'll help for a little bit. So this happens over time, and notice that this might be a psychotherapeutic process that we increment to this new understanding of what has occurred. So, content analysis of emotion, if we're looking at it from a therapeutic setting, right? When looking at emotional expression during inhibition confrontation, affect words are counted. So this is one way to measure it, to operationalize it. And notice if we can measure and operationalize, then we can track progress within the psychotherapeutic process. So, affect words like hate, love, hope, feeling, these are affect words, right? High proportion of affect words, what does it do? Well, it demonstrates significant levels of inhibition confrontation. Instead of inhibiting my emotions, I'm confronting my emotions, or I'm confronting my inhibitory process, right? But if we see someone who is crafted a narrative where there's little in the way of affect words, then there's probably a high level of emotional inhibition that can be assumed from that. So notice, through therapeutic sessions, if we were to record therapeutic sessions longitudinally, and we see that we're bringing the person to the point where they're willing to accept the emotions, we should be able to actually count the number of words that facilitate emotional expression over time and see them increase as the therapeutic intervention is bringing this to the surface. So that's relative assessment of affective content. But there's a huge number of confounding variables that could exist in this, and that's one of the caveats. It does have potential to measure progress, though, in a therapeutic session to determine treatment efficacy. That is, wow, we want people to confront their inhibitions. Here's the technique we're going to use. Over time, we see more affect-laden terms, hence evidence for the efficacy of the treatment. I'm going to break here. I'm looking at the timer, and let's just break, and then we'll go to part 2. So we've got about 20 minutes.